on our way from Dien Bien Phu to Muang Khua. We're on the Vietnam side. Not a whole lot of passengers aboard today, but there's plenty of produce. There's traps for fish. There's a machine for making tiles and bricks. So it's a pretty broad, and this is our driver. Anh tên là gì anh?
Quốc phòng.
Mr. Quốc phòng. Mr. Quốc phòng, his name means literally Mr. Defense. So I think we're in very good hands today. In fact, Quoc Phong doesn't just mean defence, it means national defence. And when we saw those words on the bus, when we were just boarding, I wrongly assumed that the bus must have been owned by the Ministry of National Defence, which is called Bộ Quốc phòng. But in fact, no, it was just the name of our driver, Mr. National Defence. And he was a very, very good driver too. So the journey between Dien Bien Phu and Muang Khua is just a bit over 100 kilometres. It's not very far at all. And of course there's a border crossing in there, so you know that's always going to cost you an hour or so. So we kind of thought, and the hotel had told us, between 3 and 4 hours. In fact, it took more like 6 hours for us to get there. We started bright and early, and we arrived in Muang Khua around time, just in time for lunch. Now the reason for the delay was not because of dodgy roads, and the border crossing only took about an hour. The main reason for the delay is that these are not really passenger services. These buses are engaged in moving lots and lots of cargo between Dien Bien Phu or between Vietnam and Laos, and so the bus is stopping constantly. Now that added its own little dimension of adventure to the journey, but it was kind of frustrating to discover that as passengers you were far lower down the line of priority than the tile machine or the motorbikes or the other incredible array of things that we were transporting into Laos. The first couple of stops along the way were quite interesting, wandering around these little towns, border towns, chatting with the locals. But after a few, and once I realised that this was taking hours, the novelty started to wear off a little. Okay, cảm ơn nha. Đi vui vẻ. The people in these little towns are always salt of the earth types. Great fun, great sense of humour, great to chat with. Người nước ngoài rất là tò mò về Việt Nam và cuộc sống và ăn uống như thế nào.
Thích ăn rau Việt Nam.
Chắc chắn là thích, nhưng mà có nhiều rau ở đây ở nước ngoài không có. Finally, the forest started to thicken, and that meant that we had passed through our last Vietnam pickup spot. We were headed now to the Laos border. We're about 6 kilometres from the border at Tay Chang, the Laos border. And the sun's now coming up. It's still fairly misty. Our driver is not following his no smoking signage on the bus, but apart from that, all is well. Definitely one of the quieter border posts I've visited. The Lao-Vietnam border at Dien Bien Phu. Well, this place is actually called Tay Chang. One of the quieter roads you're going to find in Vietnam. We're just waiting for our luggage to be checked, and we'll be on our way to the Laos border. That's the Laos frontier. Paid $30 for a visa, $5 for a photo, 2 lots of 10,000 kip for unknown reasons, and 1 lot of 3,000 kip to have my temperature taken. And we're done. And almost as soon as you cross the border, you notice a couple of really big changes. because you've left one of the most densely populated countries in Southeast Asia and arrived in one of the least densely populated countries, there suddenly aren't very many people around, and the amount of forest cover, the density of the forest cover, is also quite different, despite the fact that there's actually been a lot of logging in Laos as well in recent decades. So what gets picked up must be offloaded, and we didn't even notice these motorbikes, these beautiful new motorbikes being loaded onto our bus, onto the roof. It was a bit of a shock. In fact, there were two of them, and a rather strange thing was that these were not being delivered to a town, but were being collected by guys in the middle of the bush. So it did have a rather suspect air about it, but we don't really know what was going on exactly. One assumes that perhaps all the normal formalities for these motorbikes may not have been in order. But anyway, mysterious men arrived. Mysterious men started the bikes and drove them away, and we then got back on our way as well. Finally, we arrived in Muang Khua, and by then it was easier for me to get off the bus through the window than through the door. And we found a hotel, a little guest house. There aren't too many places to stay in Muang Khua, but they're perfectly adequate for a night's stay, and that was as long as we intended to stay here. In the afternoon, we set off for a little look at this town, Muang Khua. So Muang Khua, as you can see, is a small and charming little place, although it might have been just because I was belligerent after the 5-hour bus ride, which isn't really that long as bus rides go. But anyway, I didn't find it as friendly as most Lao towns. Maybe it just had that sort of border town kind of toughness about it. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was actually a very beautiful spot to spend an afternoon wandering around either way.
Sabadi. Hello.
This was a pretty impressive karaoke setup for an outback town. This is the Namu River that runs through the heart of Muang Khua town, and it's a beautiful spot, but also a major source of income to the villagers here and all along the river. The Namu would be our home for the following day as we headed down towards Luang Prabang, our end destination. Like Laos's other great river, the mighty Mekong, the Namu faces some major threats. There are lots of dams being built along its course to provide electricity to the local people, but also to provide electricity for export to Laos's neighbours. And there's a lot of concern about the damage these dams are doing to the natural flow of the river, fish stocks, the movement of sediment, all things that are essential to the very, very complex ecosystems that live along the river and beyond it as well. The next day, we were up bright and early to arrange our boat to take us to our first destination before hitting Luang Prabang, which was a place called Nom Khao. So check out our next video, which will be coming up very soon, covering the journey from Muang Khua to Nom Khao along the Namu River. And as I said, it covers some absolutely pristine patches of stretches of forest, and it's a really beautiful ride. Thank you very much.